Diablo 3 is an important game. What the word important means can be positive or negative or combined. It is combined to me, but that is also because I first played 3 when I was 21, and there was an outstanding difference between where I was when playing Diablo 2 and 3. I can say that I respect what this game was able to do for me. I can also say I don't have to like it specifically. I remain, I guess, quizzical about Diablo 3 as it possesses, and also does not hold a tremendous load upon itself, even though it should. This is a game that is now over 10 years old, with Diablo 4 in existence, and I stand in my own place among the myriad of players, enjoyers, obsessors, and people who simply are aware of it, and have made it my duty in my writing to understand what Diablo 3 is to me, based on my own experience with it, and also its own life and where it has gone. I can't call this a retrospective, it's more of a reflection. Taking a note from my counselor, our first step would involve some history taking. During the wait for Diablo 3, I would sometimes see rumors surrounding its development and would ask myself a question. What is Diablo 3 going to be about? This was in the late 2000s, likely around the time that info about the changeover from what Diablo 3 was going to be to what it became in 2012. I still constantly think about the events of Diablo 2, especially revolving around the in-cutscene destruction of Mephisto's and Diablo Soulstones, which to me felt final, and the historical final moment of Tyrael destroying the World Stone, and what repercussions, if any, there would be. I did not go into too much detail scrounging around for nuggets pertaining to Diablo 3's development, but when rumors around a group of cultists bringing Diablo back without a soulstone would pass by my browsing in high school, I wouldn't believe it. Again, those cutscenes felt so final, connecting to what I knew and experienced in other games. If things, like deaths, happened in cutscenes, they were dead. You were not bringing them back, unless the story was written in a way that that could happen. Diablo is the moniker of the game. I was intrigued to see what they had up their sleeves. I don't normally prime myself before the release of any new media. I'm more of a person who sees a new entry to something and think that I could get caught up. Unfortunately, I don't have enough commitment yet, or enough free time and money to do that. I'm almost caught up with Kingdom Hearts. It's been over 8 years, but in 2011, I played through Diablo 2 again. My siblings were excited as well. We each bought that collector's edition for ourselves, and the day or two before the game was released, I invested into upgrading my computer to be able to play the game. And then I waited exactly 1 year after its release, after I got the collector's edition and all the goodies it contained. I have said before on this channel how I have issues playing new games as I get them. BioWare games are my example, but it happens with other releases as well. Of course, everything that occurred with Diablo 3's launch was special to it, and I'll talk about its always online status later, but when I did not have the opportunity to play and jump into the thing that I expressed a lot of excitement for, or hype, I reflect and think about how this is not as huge as I was making it for myself. I step away and focus my attention on something else, thinking, oh, I'll get to it. It still means a lot to me. It brings me back to the comfort of the sidelines, reading about what is happening to keep myself up to date so I can jump in easily. However, you can be picky and choosy with that mentality, where you focus on what you think is cool, the internal bias. So I missed out on truly digging into the messy things that Diablo 3 had, like the auction house, the difficulty scaling, working through the loot system in great detail, and so on. The main thing I dealt with was always being online. In 2013, my Wi-Fi capabilities were abysmal, which led to consistent dropping of my play sessions. I would always notice this when my abilities would not activate, allies or enemies would do nothing, or nothing got picked up, and either the game would stop, or a gigantic explosion of sound and visual effects would occur as the game caught up with itself. I was rather frustrated with this, but tried to take it in stride, because in May 2013, for the first anniversary, there was a double experience campaign, which I don't remember them doing very often. I don't think they did that every year even. Some creators for Diablo 3 have commented the holiday event in 2022, where you could get holiday gifts in-game, had never been done before. It's quite astonishing. But I also see that as Diablo 3 being treated as a regular game that is always online, but does not have to be, compared to online games nowadays which have constant events, seasonal or otherwise, to keep player engagement up. I'll talk about seasons later. So in 2013, I invested my time in Diablo 3, fighting against it a lot of the time to simply play it, and figure out what Blizzard had crafted and what 3 would be for me. I already used the word important at the beginning, but another I could use is perplexing. It gave me plenty to think about. My main playthrough used the Witch Doctor, and a fun fact I'll always cherish is the female Witch Doctor's voice actress is Erica Luttrell, who long ago voiced Keisha in the Magic School Bus. It never fails to make me smile even now. And recently I played the Necromancer because I remembered I bought the pack for this very video years ago, and I think it is the last purchase I ever made to Blizzard. So the first thing to think about, why Tristram? Let's start with the lack of forethought there is to a population who should have knowledge of Tristram's history and should simply stay away from the area. That area of the world is Chernobyl and the Black Plague combined with the amount of misfortune that can stem from it. And now you have what is called a star fall straight into the cathedral and all the dead showing back up again. I'm already too loaded at the start. It's too much misery. This is the inciting incident, and a good one at that, because Deckard Cain might be dead because of this event being in the cathedral. This is the draw for whatever character you choose to revive in Tristram to begin with, and is a good first step. It serves as good onboarding for players, especially if they played Diablo 1, because hey, you get to go down into the cathedral again. It may not feel the same as Diablo 1, and I'll get into that, but hey, the Skeleton King's here? Sure, and we see that Cain can take a beating and still keep going. While it may make narrative sense to not have new Tristram be a thing at all because it can easily be written off as being stupid, like we know Tristram is bad, leave it alone, a foundation is needed to get us started. I know I felt antsy, like, okay, when are we getting to the new sights and sounds? After opening up the passage to more of the cathedral for mechanics purposes, and the Skeleton King, the fallen star is revealed to be a man. We're presented with an overarching mystery with a developing character. And I think to myself how quick it could have been to reveal who this character was if they did not extend the mystery. I'm at odds with the task of retrieving each piece of the stranger's sword one at a time as you hear about him, but it allows for other characters to join the fray, good and bad, companions and enemies. The time that is allowed to be spent gives room to breathe for the characters. A little, not a lot, and it is not all great either.
Must be Alaric the Guardian. Uncle Deckard told me of your eternal watch over this cursed place. I thought it was a myth.
Since with a single exchange, you usually knew where to go next, or something is uniquely sparkly and shiny. Speaking of sparkly and shiny, that sword is very important, and I really question this scene. A lot of people don't like it because Cain dies to Madame Butterfly we have at home and deserves a lot more. What I question is why Belial, whom Magda serves, wants the sword at all. I don't know what the motivation is because, to be honest, apart from 2 places and one I question its usefulness, the sword doesn't do much. There was a narrative thread here that doesn't go anywhere and makes Belial and Magna worse by proximity. Like, is this supposed to open up heaven? Cain really does not have narrative or mechanical reason to be around for the rest of the story, but to go out like that. LEAH's power is introduced, the stranger is taken, the sword is from heaven, and so the stranger is an angel. And here is where I find the narrative pacing stumbles a little bit, where you are simply trailing the coven and Magda until the end of the act. Over the hills, through the caves, into the highlands, and deep into Leoric's manor. Questionably deep. Put a pin in it. Also, ghosts if you care. Hey, do you remember the butcher? He's neat. So the stranger is dying.
I am dying.
I bring this up because after this point, the stranger never brings this up ever again. Because the stranger is actually Tyrael, turned mortal. Shouldn't he still be dying? Even if his sword is returned to him? Or does his armor out of nowhere serve as life support in this scene? And how did Tyrael show up like this? By taking action and doing his job of bringing justice and choosing to not be an angel anymore, which I don't think has come up again as that being a thing that can be done. Can demons do this? Just not be demons anymore? Are humans the ultimate mid? And that's Act 1. Onboarding well, but stumbling to its end. It is here that I will say that the cinematics are gorgeous throughout. The cinematic team, among everyone else who develops games, does not get paid enough for producing such standout pieces of cinematography. I would love to be able to say that I helped make these. Storyboard, animate, color correct, anything. They are beautiful pieces, and they actually do something that the rest of the game fails to do, which is elevate the music. Diablo 3 is on the pedestal because it is the focus of this, but Diablo 3 is a strong example of disrespecting the soundtrack that was created for it.
I must wait. The anticipation is...
Over Diablo 3's lifespan, and even with Diablo 4, a fair amount of players put on their own playlists while playing, and you will find this with streamers on Twitch playing Diablo. And that is because the sound of Diablo, the effects and ambient sounds, drown the soundtrack. So, easy and disrespectful question to ask, is Diablo 3's soundtrack any good? Let me give me my basic takes. It's mixed for me. A lot of these tracks feel like they work better when they are tied with where they are relevant, instead of me sitting in my chair disconnected with them. Tracks like "And the Heavens Shall Tremble" come in bombastically, and at the end of Act 4, when I have been tired, but really trying to portray the climax is about to happen, and I just can't care. The end of Eternal Conflict, played over the logo to set things up, is excellent. I Am Justice gives me chills, being so solemn but powerful, and how it backs off from being overpowering. It's probably my favorite track. I found Act 5 tries to balance out the music, or at least give the music space to breathe, but sometimes it's just screaming through at the wrong time, like walking through Westmarch. If you never listened to the soundtracks, you would never know that the track simply called LEAH is 8 minutes long, and I don't feel it justifies its length and triumphantness. Bastion's Keep is similar, except it's cut into 3 parts and tries playing on different motifs from Diablo 2 with Harrogath in Act 5, and also the guitar sounds of Tristram. The most notable track to me is Caldeum, because I can't stand it. It feels like it has one hook, and it goes for it as much as possible and tries to fill in its 7 minutes with something else that you won't hear as much because the hook is too strong for its own good. It does have a good flute section used for being in town though. A Tenuous Bond almost made me fall asleep in a good way, but I don't recall where that track could possibly be in the game. A New Dawn is nice, and we can't forget the Reaper of Souls soundtrack either. Okay, maybe Blood for Blood is okay, but I really could not latch on to anything with the expansion soundtrack. I think it has to do with the changing composer. Diablo 3's soundtrack had Derek Duke, Glenn Stafford, Lawrence Joubert, Edo Guidati, Matt Uelmen, Neil Acree, and finally Russell Brower as the majority composer. Reaper of Souls had Glenn Stafford, Jason Hayes, Neil Acree, Joseph Lawrence, with Derek Duke as the majority composer, and Russell Brower only involved with one song, supposedly. runes. It's a huge difference, as I find Derek Duke's compositions favor atmosphere, but lack any hooks. It's why A Tenuous Bond almost made me fall asleep in a good way. It's a strange collection of songs when Diablo 3 drowns out the music so much, like they are not even trying to cut through and find a place for themselves. You know, after I listened to all of these tracks, I needed a palate cleanser, so I unironically listened to Nyan Cat when I was done. So Act 1 was okay. Well, I hate Act 2. It sucks really badly. There is the passive disdain for the Desert Act in Diablo. People got soured in Lut Gholein in Diablo 2, and now we have Chaldeum in 3 doing a similar thing. But worse. This is the act that made me painfully aware of things Diablo 3 does that permanently damaged my experience going forward and never recovered. The reason we are in Chaldeum is because Belial, the Lord of Lies, is here, and also the Coven. We get shared the information that Belial and Azmodan, the Lord of Sin, are the last two evils, since the previous 5 were dealt with back in Diablo 2. I never thought of Andariel and Duriel to be all that important. And they're not, but they got upgraded in this story. Unfortunately, I got the feeling that the story was simply dealing with the leftovers, and to have that perspective this early on really brought me down. It told me that this is the Belial chapter, and then we have the Azmodan chapter in Act 3, and wrapping it up in 4. The amount of mystery or adventure I could have had with the story was taken away as I sat there filling in the story beats, like I had access to the rough notes. And it made me like a lot of the other players of Diablo today. I don't care about the story and the characters and want to fly past them, and what is here in the game to make me keep playing. And that sucks for initial engagement. There were interviews for Diablo 4 where people were asking what the end game was going to contain before the game even came out. If that kind of question doesn't reveal how much players can easily throw away the hard work of writers trying to create a story within the world that has been built, I don't know what will. And I was falling into that area of myself and hating it. The first part of Act 2 is just going after Magda, so you do and get on with it. Leah gets captured, you meet the Emperor, who clearly is not, and escape into the sewers. On the surface, Act 2 is annoying level-wise for people because it combines both desert areas and sewers, and there is an uncanny amount of sewers. Get out the thesaurus. We have sewers, cisterns, aqueducts, channels, causeways, waterlogged passages to stretch it a bit. And it is really connective tissue between the larger areas that could not find justification to connect. Just needing underground passages between the city and oasis and the desolate places no one should ever go to. These places are also the excuse to introduce characters like, oh, they're here, like Shen, who I admit is a cool character, although it takes too long to truly get to that. A lot of interesting world building comes from him because of who he really is. And also Adria's here, Leah's mother. I'm gonna save her for later. Sultan Kuhl also shows up, and my opinion on him has not changed since playing through this the first time. He's undercooked, and a waste of Stephen Bloom's talent. He's simply evil. Every character knows this, but the story has no other options than taking a solid third to half the act for reviving him and getting the tool needed for the rest of the story, the Black Soulstone. His lines are hackneyed, talking about the character's Nephilim roots and join me instead because I know what's best.
Your allies seek only to control you. With the power I offer, you and I could rule over all creation.
And it is simply so easy to shut him off. He dies 1 minute after he's revived anyway, so there is little incentive to invest time into his deal. But all of this seems to be a distraction from the fact that the encompassing story around Belial simply is not there. The Lord of Lies has the ability to implant himself onto the seat of power, deceive the population into getting what he wants, and has the opportunity to create clever mind games that can help develop characters and the relationships with one another, but ends up being really pathetic to experience. I think it also has to do with experiencing so many stories already involving deception, double-crossing, lying to get what you want, spy thrillers, espionage, and action involving clever wordplay, that the handling of Belial is horrible. You run into the Kid Emperor in the sewers soon after you rescue Adria, and every single one of his lines, to the character's credit, do sound like a child's effort in trying to keep things a secret, but help out in trying to find Belial from within. But even when the characters in the game know this is highly suspicious and do little to nothing to course correct, like maybe he is trying to actually help, you have given up on that section of the story because your priorities have changed to the Black Soul Stone.
He did not really answer your question. Who are?
To give Belial credit, based on the little time that he is present, he does seem to be the most childish out of the seven evils, especially when Asmodan is right after. But Belial could have been crafty and intelligent in a way that could have been comparable to Mephisto. The way he keeps banging on the floor and thrashing like a tantrum during the fight is also something I pay forward. I don't think it was intentional, but if it was, maybe there was an attempt. Most people who talk about Diablo usually talk about the gameplay and mechanics, which I am not equipped to do well, but I noticed some things that left me rattled as I continued playing. First, I find Diablo 3 favors spectacle over realism to its presentation. Remember that pin about the questionably deep areas? The isometric perspective limits what can be done with background elements and can sometimes mess with sense of height. With Diablo 3, backgrounds have ridiculous height differences. In Act 5 of Diablo 2, when you reach the summit of Mount ARREAT, you get a sense of the amount of the mountain you have climbed before entering into the final areas. It's good use of the perspective. When you're in the hidden camp in Act 2 of Diablo 3, how high above Caldeum is this area? In Act 1, how deep does the cathedral or Leoric's manor or numerous other caves and places go? There's this problem with creating cavernous voids to create an open space visually and not make it cramped when it should be. I should not be thinking about how many seconds it would take me if I jumped off an edge to hit the bottom. Could I just parachute into Caldeum from the camp? In the transition from Caldeum back to the camp, how much of an arduous trip would it be in order to climb all the way back up? I love when you get to Zoltan Kuhl's archives, and he says he had to build all of this for his research.
I had to build all of this for my research and my experiments.
Like, you don't need any of this giant chasm in order to get this job done. Diablo 3 makes its environments as extravagant in size as possible that it takes away tension. I would rather be skulking through tombs and rickety tunnels, hastily and crappily built, that could collapse at any moment, than Zoltan Kuhl's impossible magical palace of emptiness. It's too clean for its own good. The game also smashes you over the head with all the things littered around the maps. Events are constant, either put in a corner somewhere or put in a nook that you can enter, and within a minute, you simply leave with an experience bonus. This also is true of lore or bestiary notes that come up constantly. Kill an enemy and find as many bags littered on the ground as possible, and you'll hear a different character speak about something, or try to over the sound effects. I found that they tried to dampen the sound effects to make the voices come out better, but it's best to adjust the volume sliders yourself.
The angel I captured, Inarius, is in love with me. I can feel the intensity of his desire. I told him that we must liberate.
The amount of things that you can find within Diablo 3's world is large, and in the beginning was a good time. It stopped being a good time in Act 2, though. Randomization is, or maybe was now, core to Diablo's map design from the first game. Each new time you entered into a new area, you didn't know exactly what it would look like and where everything was that you needed to find. 3 continued with this, but I think it reached the ceiling because there were too many extra things that players could stumble into. That's why I think Diablo 3 went for a different approach of creating map designs, some with unique events exclusive to a specific map type that was carved out for it. This really hurt my enjoyment of the game because it was tied to something else. Achievements. I like achievements. I also hate them. I like them because I like checklists and feeling accomplished when I finish something. I also hate them because I lose the enjoyment of simply playing a game with no extra stress. The map design screamed out to me so hard because back in 2013, I wanted to get all the campaign achievements. And there is one in Act 2 that is truly despicable. It's called Wheel of Misfortune, and it has tainted me. Experience all the possibilities of the ancient device in the Desolate Sands. In a specific map design of the Desolate Sands at the south end, there is a raised area with an object you can interact with, and there are 10 different results when you click on it. This turns a game about discoverability and wonder about what you're going to find, rips that skin off, and shows how everything is a game of chance. You only get one go at this event per play session, and because it is tied to a specific map design, it is not guaranteed to show up every time. Add in that you can experience one of the 10 outcomes more than once, the probability is against you from the very start. I did spend more than a dozen hours loading into a game, quitting, and reloading just to see everything that the game had to offer, which was not worth it at all, but I will never ever take off that bow accent from my personal banner. Achievements suck, but I will continue to do them because they make it so easy to invest time into them. Achievements fall into different categories, and Diablo 3 organizes them somewhat decently and serves as a great microcosm. Data is important to developers and people alike, especially since it can show who has bought the game versus doing the very first thing that can be done in the game. I was playing Blue Point's remake of Shadow of the Colossus, for example, and made a note of how some of its achievements made the effort to point players in the direction of things they may not interact with, like doing tricks with aggro, your horse. There isn't anything tangible to this, but that sense of learning and seeing that effort was put into the game, and even in the PS2 original, makes more worthwhile achievements. I am never going to see all of the ghosts in Diablo 3, and never get a glimpse at the set dungeons, because those moments are hidden behind chance and luck, and I have more luck of my current home being burned down by wildfires than me seeing a thing that would not even promise me an acceptable level of dopamine to think that it was all worth it. Heck, Diablo 3, with all of its changes over the years, even has obsolete achievements because of the difficulty changes in seasons. So if you have not been involved in the game, what are you even doing? Act 3 reminds us that Mount ARREAT exploded when the World Stone was destroyed in Diablo 2, and I want to start this off by mentioning how, from a logical standpoint, stupid this act is. Our heroes have the Black Soulstone right now, which, through convenience sake, now has 6 of the 7 evils within it. It's in these throwaway lines from characters that the story continues.
What is this? How has this happened? The souls of the dead lords of hell have been absorbed into the stone.
Convenience-driven story writing. We now have to approach Azmodan and his army pouring out of the ARREAT crater, pretty much just an unchecked gateway between Hell and Sanctuary, to turn the front lines of Bastion's Keep and fighting back against the hordes of Hell into the only line. Because of this plan of going straight for Azmodan's giant goes south, we are done. There is no backup, because LEAH has to keep the Black Soulstone contained because it's a stupid man-made thing that doesn't work as intended, and we killed the guy who made it work in the first place, and if we don't make this plan work, the other evils are going to get out. I keep spending so much time trying to rationalize this concept for this act, and it didn't help that due to the perspective and presentation problem I mentioned earlier, I have no earthly idea of how big Bastion's Keep even is. It might as well be larger than Mount ARREAT, which exploded for how well it has defended against demons so far. People talk about how old the defenses are without maintenance, and it reminded me of Act 2 talking about Dalgur, and apparently his oasis leading to the construction of too many aqueducts, all of these omnipresent people to write off these questions for. It's fine, really, it's fine. Act 3 also brings in the human element to the story. As you proceed in the act, you can literally make laps around the stronghold to listen to people and how they're dealing with the situation. This whiny piece of shit is here too, and of all the places you could have run to from Tristram, how the f did you get here?
Cruel fortune has left me as a lowly merchant once again. And now I'm minutes away from slaughter by the demonic hordes. Please, escort me out of here. I will pay anything.
You have learned nothing.
Why did you come here? Actually listening to the people here is such whiplash sometimes because they try to be scared of the situation, but also try to jokingly shrug off what is happening, which comes across as tasteless, especially when, as you are traveling through the areas, if you see a soldier, they are highly likely to die immediately. If they don't die, chances are that you interrupted the scripting or something, because you cannot rely or expect to rely on anyone but yourself to get the job done unless it is forced.
What happened to the scout? Is he still alive?
Not for long. You must go on alone.
I see. Thank you for the news. I will tell his family. Look out!
That poor man.
Like, Tyrael will say his sword will open this gate, but I doubt it when a demon crashes through it immediately afterward. I've said this before in my Hellgate video, thank you so much for watching it by the way, that a pet peeve of mine is where you play a character that needs to solve everybody's problems because they can't do it for themselves. Showing no autonomy, they would get in the way of the player. But Diablo 3 attempts to show that parts of the world are protecting themselves. They're doing their part. Unfortunately, those parts usually reach a point of stalemate or not being able to do more, and generally that is where the player comes in. Diablo 3 tries to have it so that they are doing it alone, with characters coming in and out of the story like LEAH, Tyrael, or even the companion characters I have not mentioned at all until now. But can the world move on after the player's efforts?
Azmodan thinks he can scare us. He doesn't know us at all. Put his head on a pike.
Act 3 has a lot of fluff to it. Lighting the signal fires at the beginning doesn't make me believe that morale is boosted once again, or raising catapults, which should already be out, and then being pulled into fighting against a breach in the defenses in the keep's depths, with depths in quotations. Even when you finally make it to the ARREAT crater, there is more fluff when Sedea and you have to go through the towers. There are a lot of words being said in Act 3, but not a lot of talking. Azmodan talks the most out of all the villains, constantly appearing as the big giant head, but you can just sprint past this and keep going. You accidentally do this with Sedea as she appears to talk to you nearly every level of the crater and towers before fighting her, because she shows up right at the entrance. But a regular player is simply going to fly by, not stop. And then we reach the scene in which all is revealed. Now, playing through this again, and listening to all the dialogue and conversations you can have throughout the acts with Tyrael, Adria, LEAH, even Kain, I thought I was missing something when this event happened to make it hit more. I think Tyrael's delivery is a sack of bricks.
Adria, when did you decide to betray us?
It turns out I was. On the same day of Diablo 3's release was The Order by Nate Kenyon, a novel that ties in Kain's adventures before Diablo 3 begins, and also the background of LEAH. I haven't talked about LEAH much because she is a frustrating character. To truly piece together everything going on around LEAH, not only was it recommended to read The Order, but also the Book of Kain, released in December of 2011, with some snippets related to LEAH, The Book of Tyrael, released in October of 2013, expanding on events in Diablo 3. And if you were really patient, the Book of Adria, with other bits and pieces related to LEAH, released December 2018, 6 years after the game came out. And if you can't get enough, LEAH was also mentioned in The Storm of Light, also by Nate Kenyon, released in February of 2014. I will admit that you don't need all of the extended material, but the very notion that this much is sitting there for these events to be more worthwhile gives me mixed thoughts. I would say Diablo has a healthy amount of extended media compared to other franchises, even having renowned fantasy author Richard A. Knaak write 6 books, including the Sin War trilogy. I also understand that supplemental and multimedia projects can lead to great results. I'm a fan of .hack, and experiencing the culmination of the original quadrilogy, .hack Sign and Liminality, and even investing in some of the books and manga, like Another Birth, is still one of the most satisfying experiences I have ever had. Nowadays, those attempts can be an extreme gamble, and we live in an oversaturated and exhausting time in media where creations can link together into one package and can get easily lost, forgotten, or even without knowing they exist to begin with. And from a lack of knowledge on audiences, I don't see Diablo fans being those kind of people who would respect this kind of effort. To back it up a bit, the Order is really the main extra material for Diablo 3, so let's briefly touch on it. Where does LEAH come from, and how did Kain get involved with her? Back in Diablo 1, after the now named hero Aiden slammed Diablo's soulstone into his head, he had sex with Adria. Rewritten to not be a simple old crow, as LEAH was to serve as a vessel for Diablo. When Tristram went sideways, Adria escaped with Jillian, the barmaid, all the way to Chaldeum. After LEAH was born, Adria did not stay, leaving Jillian, who was progressively losing her sanity, to take care of LEAH. Years later, Belial would begin hunting for LEAH, and Kain would arrive, checking in on Jillian during his adventure. LEAH and Jillian did not have a great relationship, as Jillian saw her own madness in past events in LEAH, and LEAH had dreams from being the daughter of Adria and Diablo taking over Aiden's body. It ultimately led to Jillian attempting to kill LEAH late one night, but her power manifested, slamming Jillian against the wall. Kain arrived to help the situation, and soon after, their house caught fire, threatening Jillian's life, causing LEAH's power to work again, helping them escape with the help of another man. Jillian was taken away, leaving Kain to become her new guardian, leaving Chaldeum behind. LEAH called Kain Uncle Deckard because Jillian did, and learned from Kain that Adria was her true mother. From here, Kain and LEAH began their adventures together, including coming across a cult who attempted to sacrifice LEAH to save themselves from the end of days, where Sanctuary and Heaven were to fall, or the story of Diablo 3. And LEAH has blue fire come out of her hands? This book is far more intimate about its confrontations with things than the Diablo games, where you fight hordes of enemies. Like, Kain and LEAH make their way into a town in the area of Kurast and get attacked by a feeder, one of the giant mosquito demons. They arrive in Gaia-Kul, as Kain has been on the hunt for a group of scholars who emulate the Horadrim, known as the First Ones. One of these members, Lund, taught her how to use a bow, and soon after were attacked in the city by Khazra, the goat demons, also fallen, undead, and corrupted townsfolk. LEAH was taken during this battle by their group's leader, Gareth Rau, who had fallen to corruption by Belial and planned to use LEAH's abilities and blood to summon Belial into Sanctuary. However, Kain, leading the others, managed to stop Rau and free Gaia-Kul of Rau's dark influence. LEAH and Kain would leave the First Ones to continue on their own, continue their own adventures, piecing together the prophecy of the end days, and try to help LEAH understand her abilities with little success, but never seeming to come across any other events as big as dealing with Gareth Rau. The reason I find LEAH frustrating is that she is given a large amount of development and experience of what is out in the world, some firsthand and a lot from Kain, and she is hopelessly ignorant to the greater threat looming.
Please, Uncle.
Not more of your stories. All that matters now is that you're back. He's convinced that the forces of hell will invade our world and bring about the end times. All these years, he's still searching for a way to stop this apocalypse.
She has dealt with demons, but big demons? No, those are just stories. I didn't mention that LEAH is roughly 8 years old during the Order, and continues her adventures for 13 years afterward until Diablo 3 begins, making her roughly 21 or 22. You would think that if she had traveled with Cain for over half her lifetime, she would believe in the existence of Diablo and other grand threats without having encountered them firsthand. She was going to be sacrificed multiple times to these greater threats for different reasons, one of them being for bringing Belial into the world. How does Belial show up since this way failed? It literally takes Tyrael showing her heaven and what happened to him to finally shrug it off. She is just incredibly ignorant. Her powers really don't get developed either, as when Act 3 begins, she is perpetually stuck shooting a dark laser into the Black Soulstone. I don't know what I'm asking for, but LEAH is missing some form of revelation. For story's sake, this lack of revelation is what Adria takes advantage of, pretty much exhausting LEAH's mental and physical capacities so she can be completely annihilated when taking on all 7 evils, with Diablo as a controller into her body as the vessel, just as Adria says here. Took 6 years for that quote. I love having the Black Soulstone as a desk ornament. That seems like a good idea. I don't have much to say about Adria.
Kindness will not help us survive in these dark times.
She is rather flat in her character, not presenting much definition, saying she is dedicated, saying she has sacrificed, but you can never truly believe it.
Azmodan has ruled the ravening hordes of the burning hells for over 3 centuries. His cunning is beyond imagining.
I am yet to be impressed.
Adria's betrayal doesn't even do much for her character, and instead the player character in Act 5, when you go to find her, develops a little bit of rage towards her, lashing out a little bit at Lorath, who follows you to make sure we get the information, which is little but enough. Tyrael is also flat after regaining his memory, and he is certainly not an angel of good judgment.
A madman. We would do better to leave him asleep in the desert than to call on him for aid.
You have a better idea.
I do not. It is merely a warning.
So, you must ask yourself, how much would you risk to save this wretched world?
Everything.
So be it.
They even try to joke around with him being mortal now, like, haha, I have to eat food, oops, I ate too much, how do organs work?
My stomach feels strange.
Did you forget to eat again?
No. In fact, I decided to get the day's eating out of the way all at once. I kept at it until I couldn't take another bite.
Oh, it sounds like you ate too much then.
Being a mortal is very complicated.
Anyway, back to the scene. LEAH becomes the vessel for Diablo, who also is the vessel of the other 6 evils, making him the prime evil. I would have loved to see this scene in a cinematic, but apart from time and effort, putting a warning window before going to the next act might have been awkward or tipped people off too much. When we do get the cinematic, I feel ripped off that they don't do much with Diablo and LEAH's body. I find it strange that the power coming out of Imperious's spear just becomes fire, which seems boring, and off-screen, LEAH's body turns into Diablo's body. No transformation. Nothing. And that the gate to heaven was shattered beautifully, by the way, by the perfect throwing of Imperius into it. That is all it seemed to take. Act 4's pacing feels rushed, and I guess that is for the sake of the plot, in which you have to hurry to stop Diablo from doing the thing. Act 4 is also much shorter compared to the others, with roughly 2 locations and reusing Bastion's Keep as a hub. And there is something that I struggle with that Act 4 tries to deliver. Seeing heaven. Everything that Diablo as a series has done for depictions of heaven and hell, they really make heaven not look appealing. Like, heaven sure sucks, doesn't it? But I think part of that comes down to cynical things like popularity between heaven and hell, and also commercialism. People really like hell. There is something about it that captures people's imaginations, from being inspired by the Divine Comedy and the Inferno, to other media that talks about the afterlife, fantasy or otherwise. Hell also brings in a characteristic of survival, grit, resilience, in that if you were down in hell, you wanted to live to see another day, escape, or defeat something greater than yourself. Heaven doesn't do that for people. It's too clean, safe, and for some people, boring, because it is generally considered paradise. In the Divine Comedy, it is Paradiso. And not a lot of people continue reading the Divine Comedy to even get to Paradiso. Like, you have to get through Purgatorio first and whatever there, am I right? So when it comes to the depiction of heaven, there is intrinsically less motivation into fleshing it out, what there is to see and explore. So we need to corrupt it a little bit in order to get some flavor out of it. I keep thinking about the angels. You have the 5 angels of the council, not including Inarius and another angel called Yarius, who is only mentioned in supplementary material and in the Crusader story path, and the 5 angels are each flawed in their own way. Tyrael is flawed in how he is written, narrow in his thought process because the story needs to move forward with things like there is no other option. He lacks perspective in his aim for justice. Auriel, the Archangel of Hope, feels like one of those people who refuse to see acceptance of circumstances and how to manage them, instead stating that things can be better. And even Ethereal, the Archangel of Fate, is right next to her stating, heaven is completely screwed and we're gonna lose, so says fate. But we'll be fine, we just gotta believe. Ethereal's flaw is submission to fate and destiny. There is also the entire thing of the character being a Nephilim, which is parallel to Kingdoms of Amalur, which also came out in 2012, where you have a character that can go against fate. Especially in the present day, a character who can break fate is a lazy ability for a writer to bestow on a character, because it means they can do anything. And at the lowest bar, simply prove fate wrong and change it.
We are all doomed. Fate has said so.
Really? Well, I don't think so.
And then they prove it wrong. That is story writing to the equivalent of a 4th grader who is getting a C in language. Able to understand and use the basics, but not much else. Imperius sure is stupid, isn't he? Oh, I wish we could kill him. As the Archangel of Valor, his flaw is simply blindness to the acts and contributions of others around him, and the positive aspects of them. He is the strong guy who can be replaced, and is, because he doesn't respect the aid of others. And Malthael, Archangel of Wisdom, whose flaw is too much wisdom, mentally crushing him thinking he knows the solution to everything, leading to the Reaper of Souls expansion, and being foolish and an idiot. And he isn't even around in Act 4, which they acknowledge by simply saying he goes off on his own a lot of the time. We'll get to him soon. I like how we get into the creation story of heaven and hell here too. If Diablo 5 ever becomes a thing in the 2030s, it might be about Anu and Tathamet coming back to completely reset the world, because I don't know where they're going to go after Diablo 4's ending. If anywhere, really. Act 4 is an awkward one where they try to make the return of characters as you climb the tower, but realize that there are not a lot of characters you can do that with, so you have Magda, LEAH, and for some reason Marius.
Me to that foul asylum, Tyrael. Why did you forsake me when you knew Baal still walked among us?
If I were more of a reactionary type, I would have done a spit take and then cursed out people for even deigning to put him in here, because it does not do anything. Tyrael says nothing and probably does not even remember him enough for this to have weight. Also, Iswal's here too, to die, again. Again, I wish we could have fought Imperius because boy does he want to fight us, but alas, Diablo is rushing things along, so this must be a moment for the player alone. I don't need gassing up, and my skeletons help me just fine. There is even a stupid line in here where they think they can save LEAH.
LEAH knew the protective spells of the Horadrim. Diablo took control over her body, but he can never twist her mind.
No. Even after the fighting, the ending is swift. Like, we have no time to revel in anything, especially with how Diablo, as a game, now treats everything from heaven and hell. We might have defeated Diablo, but Diablo is not dead. All because of the eternal conflict.
Take heed and bear witness to the truths that lie herein, for they are the last legacy of the Horadrim. There is a war that rages on even now, beyond the fields that we know, between the utopian kingdoms of the high heavens and the chaotic pits of the burning hells. This war is known as the Great Conflict, and it has raged and burned longer than any of the stars in the sky. Neither side ever gained sway for long, as the forces of light and darkness constantly vie for control over all creation.
The eternal conflict is something that has been known about since Diablo 1, called the Great Conflict in-game. This eternal stalemate has been in place between the two sides, with Sanctuary in the middle. The thing that they made clear for Diablo 3 is when an angel or demon dies, they are able to return. It's almost like if they got tagged by the other team and had to go back to their original spot. It's why the Soul Stones were important, because they could trap Diablo, Mephisto, and Baal in Diablo 2 so they could not come back. Destroying them was changed though. They made a big thing in Diablo 2 about destroying the Soul Stones to be the last thing you do, but now we can't destroy it. But Adria says yes, destroy it, but she was lying? But shouldn't Tyrael know that they don't work like that? It was even asked at BlizzCon 2019 what happened to the souls when the Black Soul Stone was destroyed at the end of Act 5. And they just said they were free. They separated back into their original forms and are just out there. The eternal conflict in these ideas deflate most efforts throughout the series, putting in all of this work to overall not be satisfying because they simply cannot have a Diablo game without Diablo and the rest of the villains, or won't dare to. But I feel there is another angle to this whole thing with the rise of what gaming is today. We have an eternal conflict. We like when things can go on forever, and maybe we can do that with the games themselves. Enter the Reaper of Souls expansion, which most would now consider as Diablo 3. I'm not sure who would consider Diablo 3 to be Diablo 3 as it was between 2012 and 2014 before that expansion came out, because it changed its identity. Let's start with Act 5 to simply finish that part up. I don't think anyone back then batted an eye at Lorath or expected him to become the character he does in Diablo 4, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I was still in a headspace of looking at the characters being complete idiots and doing too much questioning. I guess LEAH was not needed to contain the Black Soul Stone, just a nice pedestal. And why such a gigantic place for this thing? What is the practicality of the huge space? Tyrael just thinking this is pure evil, but I want it to look nice. I was also still in Act 3 mode, where most people who are not important die, and sure enough, I did find Malthael's extremely subtle head motion to be creepy when I first saw it, and the effects work on the dying Horadrim. I questioned how Tyrael got off so easily, but I guess it is in the explanation that Tyrael may be mortal, but since he used to be an angel, he has no demon blood, which all people on Sanctuary have, so Malthael didn't care that much, I guess. And ultimately, Tyrael is not a great strategist. He did not possess multiple backup plans for protecting the Black Soul Stone when Malthael just followed them in. And he doesn't have to be, because he falls on the player character, which I find on a writing standpoint kind of insulting to character development. So we get to fix everything. There was a messenger from Westmarch who appeared in Act 3 for Tyrael to not do much of anything other than be ignorant, similar to LEAH. So now Westmarch gets to be completely annihilated by the undead. Anytime you see a soldier out on the streets, the chance for survival is grave. Act 5 feels like Act 3, down to the presentation where we have different NPCs showing their own perspectives and mini-stories during your travels, and also finalizes the stories of your companions, Cormac, Lyndon, and Irena, and even Shen, a former god, whom they tried something poetic with him in his own silly way. I really don't have much to say about the companions. Instead of a list of recruits in Diablo 2, you get the knight, rogue, and mage templates to swap at your leisure. Their stories are okay, but also lead to very little to chew on. Templars are bad, thieves are bad, and Irena's sisters had to sacrifice themselves for her to live for their cause. I hate to diminish what they tried to do, but you can. They smash so many extra events into just Westmarch. Sometimes it feels like you trip over them, especially when some of them deal with the collapse of the ruling class of Westmarch. Things are crumbling, but we just have to keep going. And that was what I was unfortunately doing since Act 4, rushing through everything. I was not letting myself get absorbed in what the game was trying to show me, but then again, the game wasn't helping either. By the time you're hunting Adria, I noticed that Act 5 was being inspired by things that came before. I already mentioned the feeling that it was like Act 3 again, but when you're finding the ruins of Corvus, an old Nephilim city, which by the way goes absolutely nowhere cool, a lot of potential lost there, you're doing the equivalent of finding Tal Rasha's tomb in Diablo 2 again. There are false entrances guarded by symbols, and you need to find the right one. So Adria's boring, goes swimming, and you end her, and you are on your way to the Pandemonium Fortress. I remember playing this in 2014 and my eyes glazing over as I wandered through the battlefields leading to the Pandemonium Fortress and simply not caring anymore. I found the Pandemonium Fortress a little bit interesting in Diablo 2, standing as this tiny place, a last bastion before you dove into hell. The connective tissue for getting to the fortress will just be confusing to me. It seemed like we would get actual transportation to the fortress from heaven, but no, we need to do map traversal. Imperius shows up here and...
Malthael is my brother. I fought 1,000 battles by his side, and I care not that he seeks to destroy you and your kind. But my brother has grown sick, and he must be put down for his own sake. Yet I have not the heart to do this. And so it falls to you. Come, Nephilim, to Pandemonium. Your kind does not belong here. If I see you again, you will die.
Pay him no mind.
I have yet to be able to say anything coherent. Imperius is the embodiment of a person who has been on social media too much and you just don't want to engage with him. What are you trying to say with these lines?
But know this, Nephilim. Even if you release Malthael from his madness, I will not thank you for it.
Indeed.
It's after collecting fluff to operate a giant battering ram that we learn what Malthael wants to do. Complete and total destruction of demonic souls, using the Black Soulstone to absorb every scrap of demonic essence from everything. This would mean an extinction of Sanctuary. But he does this for the sake of ending the eternal conflict. Death is his ultimatum. So how do we fight death? With death itself. We gain the aspect because we need an extra tool to be able to deal with Malthael at all, blindly go through Pandemonium Fortress because, God, it is a mess to look at. I'm hesitant to say that this place is the worst map design in all of Diablo. It is too visually busy, and from a story perspective, they put too much suspense and importance in this place. And the explanation for why the Pandemonium Fortress is like this is because it is caught between heaven and hell. It is changing because Malthael has control, and Tyrael, even though he helped build the thing, is unable to help. They also put in an extra character for the class you're playing, but these interactions do not add anything. Well, at least I can add another achievement to my list. Glad I'm getting a reward for listening to writing that should have something special in it instead of writing being rewarding in itself. And then you beat Malthael. Now, I want for you to guess how I felt after finishing the campaign based on what the game naturally does here. I find the use of the song Immortal Heart to not be the song that is needed here. It struck the wrong chord in me as Tyrael saunters in so mechanically it is insulting, and picking up loot I'm only going to salvage later. I felt so deflated looking at the sad background, and after only 3 lines of dialogue, the act was over. A lot of things felt stolen, like the game was robbed and had no clothes to wear or couldn't pay for water anymore. I felt like I was at a party and the host didn't show up. And then Tyrael says a whole bunch of nonsense that doesn't go anywhere.
But within her beats a mortal heart that will one day be tempted to corruption. On that day, will she have the strength to resist? Or will she be our doom?
To be honest, if I was the player character and overheard that Tyrael just gave up in believing in my good character, I would just prove him right. I experienced heartache and still do recalling this. I can sense a lack of belief in their own creative vision and ability to create something good, or simply saw what they had, didn't like it, and we had to witness all of these poor ideas being burned in front of us. I would call Reaper of Souls' Act 5 pretty bad because there is nothing to hold on to, nothing to cherish, and very little to share. More challenges and rewards await you in adventure mode. Or I'll just say what Diablo 3 became. Sanctuary is a pretty terrible world. People sometimes ask the question, if you had to go to any fictional or fantasy world you could think of, where would you go? The world of Sanctuary would not be on anybody's top 10 list. It can be a world of discovery, wonder, obvious danger, and adventure, but it's mostly a world of sadness, corruption, and to different degrees complete ignorance and blissful ignorance. I asked about Tristram at the beginning of this thing and how there is little collective improvement, teamwork, common sense, and happiness. Other fantasy worlds would have analytical focuses on whether or not the world that is depicted for all its faults, errors, missteps is worth saving. And Sanctuary may not be worth saving. It may be beyond saving, given the direction that they went with Diablo 4. What I'm saying is, Malthael was right. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But where I'm coming from is that beyond the whole creation part of Sanctuary, I don't feel a sense of pride from the writers over the history of the games in the kind of world they have created, especially not with Diablo 3. Diablo 1's world was small, intimate, and had a clear focus and power behind it. I sense pride in that creation. Diablo 2 allowed for experimentation. The doors were open to create whatever they wanted. Diablo 3 feels intimidated by its past, by what was already done and so pivotal, and that it was caught in both shadows and could not see the sun the way the others saw it. And that sun has set. So let's focus on the game part of the game as much as possible so that players keep coming back to it forever. I mean, people finish the campaign in 7 to 12 hours on the first day of Diablo 3's release, and Blizzard themselves want you to get the campaign over with before you can jump into the true Diablo experience. Seasonal play. game journalism is awful sometimes. I feel gross. We stand at what Diablo 3 created that continues into its future, its recurring gameplay loop of seasonal content. Since August 29th, 2014, the structure of seasons has existed within Diablo's framework for giving players something to do after they have experienced everything there is to offer. Or sometimes everything they want to see. But it ultimately takes away something. The character being an actual character. Now, if you choose to accept engaging in it, you are developing a variety of action figures to smash against enemies with absurd damage numbers, and I get tired. When the season is over, they are put on a shelf to probably never be played with again, because you have to make new ones every season, sometimes more than one in order to get class-specific sets of equipment so that you can make the build that is almost required to be recognized on a leaderboard. Diablo 3 has had nearly 30 seasons of this pattern, with Diablo 2 Resurrected, Diablo Immortal, and Diablo 4 also following suit. I tried finding people who regaled in their history of engaging in seasons in Diablo 3, and I didn't get much out of that hunt other than reflecting on how unremarkable a majority of the seasons were, trying to find footing and overall vision for what they were going to be, themes being bare bones, and also connecting to events in other game genres and structures like MMOs or mobile games. Seasons lasted roughly for 4 months on average, but a lot of gamers are not going to spread out their game time for that. Before Diablo 3, there were few games like it that people could enjoy and get the same feeling that Diablo gave them. When Diablo 3 came out, you could get the feeling that people were so pent up and needing to release their energy in a gigantic burst to complete and beat everything in their path that was provided to them. When events come out in games, people are going to complete what is on offer as fast as possible, sometimes in less than 24 hours, get everything they want, and then leave, rebuilding that pent-up energy until the next season rolls around. Demolish content, don't want to miss anything because I want my build to be the best it can possibly be. And not just Diablo either. You'll find it in any loot-based game people will theory craft. It's an obsession. To permit a tangent, I played through Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin and really enjoyed my time with it. Constantly swapping out items, looks, classes, and just experimenting with everything. I felt refreshed going through the main story with its goofy tone, but challenged when it comes to my experience with action games. And then you get to the DLC, which for the most part closes its doors with iron bars and says,
"Fun time is over,"
as you now must balance your abilities with the growing difficulty. Experimentation that can be felt as lighthearted in the main game disappeared quickly to pick your classes and stick with them. And now your loot mattered. I like when loot didn't really matter, and it wasn't about multipliers and what loot works best with what kind of enemy and the level of effectiveness. But that is what the build videos are for, to show you how you can smash the game over your knee. How do you get the equipment? Good luck and get good, I guess. It's mostly random outside of having the right modifiers and amount of modifiers on when you play for the equipment to have a chance at dropping. And that's not what I want anymore. I came to a connection that I've been seeing in games recently. Video games, especially those with extra transactions, want to get you in them so you can invest your time as soon as possible for as long as possible. They are creating a universe and want you to be there at or as close to the beginning as possible so you can experience all of it and you can be a part of the development journey. I call it the Big Bang Theory. So many games now want to be this ever-expanding entity from this little tiny spot. And then, after so many years, you and the developers can look back and go, wow, look at how far we've come since we created this thing. And you were there. You didn't miss out. Some people ask the question, when is the best time to start playing a game that is in this state of continued development? And most answers are in the vein of right now, or they will share that the game does anniversary events with great rewards, so start around those times. But a lot of the time, the quote, best time was at the beginning. Oops, you missed that. When the game may or may not have worked at all. You missed the season? Well, that sucks, but it can also be freeing. Sometimes missing something can be the information you need to understand if it is truly worthwhile to engage. When everyone is telling you to hurry up so you don't miss it, is it that big of a deal? How long will the universe be around for? Will the universe be everything I dreamed it could be? Is it even possible to catch up with everything that I have missed as the edge of the universe gets further and further away? Diablo 3 is always online. It has been a contentious point that has repeated itself. It has also done something to games and media that existed already, but not as forward. It has created a controlled lifespan for these products, from its beginning to the unknown time when its life support will be turned off and stops living. Until then, it can be moved around, changed, swapped out for newer parts, updated, but God forbid the community around them do anything directly because that is some horrible taboo, I guess. But ultimately, Diablo 3 is just something that has been standing there since 2012. Standing there so that its younger siblings have the chance to run until it eventually disappears into nothingness. The end of its made universe. Thank you very much for watching this video. This marks the end of this series and a project that I'm glad to have been able to finish. I hope a few of you will stick around for whatever I do next, as there are a couple projects that I hoped I can bring to fruition in the future. My main hope being that I don't take multiple years to finish it. That's it. Take care, everyone.